Hi, this is Eddie Floyd with 99.1 FM Talk, Fox News Radio, right here in northern Nevada, your Fox News radio station. This is Nevada Matters. With me today, my co-host Steve Ause from Incline Village. We're going to be talking about something that I'm sure is on every one of your minds out there listening, and that's the shooting in Tucson. Steve, welcome to Nevada Matters.
Eddie, thank you for having me here. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, how tragic. What's your take on it? What's your take on it?
I think it's awful. It's just awful, of course. No one can say anything else. But it's also a tragedy that people are trying to use this for political advantage.
Absolutely. Seems like, Steve, you hit the nail on the head. Seems like any time, as a matter of fact, every time there's a tragedy in the great United States of America, it seems like both sides of the aisle utilize it for their own political agenda.
I believe you're right. Rahm Emanuel, Obama's chief of staff, said earlier this year, you never want a serious crisis to go to waste. He was quoted as saying that, and I think that kind of tells you where we're coming from. I was looking at Rasmussen polls over the weekend, and 28% of people say this was a result of political anger. In other words, not many, and about 58% think it's just an act of a madman. It's also interesting, too, Pelosi was interviewed, and she talked about this event, and her words slowed down, and she called it an accident. And I don't know how you can call such an act an accident. I guess it just shows you their desire not to show that we have personal responsibility. But this was an accident. Can you imagine that?
Steve, one of the things, of course, for me personally, and of course for, I'd say, a large majority of our 99.1 listeners right here, large majority, every time something like this happens, notice the gigantic move to take away guns again, always. Gun control, gun control, gun control.
Yeah, I read that gun sales are robust right now in Arizona. Only 29% of voters think that stricter gun control would have really helped prevent this. And, the bad guys, they do illegal things. And so if you make having guns illegal, what's it to them? It'll just help keep us law-abiding folks from protecting ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, just the rationale, thinking of, okay, if we take away their guns, a guy who's planning to kill someone, he's not going to break the law and secure a gun? Come on, that makes no sense to me, but yet time after time they do it. What about the economy? Do you think that an event like this has anything to do with the stock market?
No, I don't think there's a connection. I want to tell you a story. I have
Please.
My own story about guns. Some years ago, our daughter lived with an abusive husband, and we didn't know this at the time, and he was very controlling. And we got a call one time as a friend rescued her. He had taken the keys to the car, he had turned off the phone, but she was on her way up. And she said, Dad, he threatened to kill you if I left him. And it wasn't because we had animosity, it was because he was trying to control her and using me as a hostage.
Wow.
So the moment she was in the car and she had an hour and a half drive up, I came down here to Reno and I got my first gun. And to me, I found that comforting because we were in our home. I installed motion sensors, I installed cameras, and I had a gun. I worked with the Sheriff's Department as chaplain. I consulted them on what kind of gun, and I got a concealed weapons permit. And to me, it gave me security because fortunately, he never did show up to kill me. He was in the neighborhood and he was outside the bounds of the restraining order, but at least I felt somewhat more comfortable that I could protect my family.
Let's stay on that topic for a minute and let's utilize the tragic event that took place in Tucson. Steve, would you agree with me that if Steve Ause would have been in the crowd when this madman started shooting people, do you think that he would have been limited in the number of deaths and in the number of casualties that he caused if you had a weapon, a concealed weapon?
If I had an opportunity, I would have done something about it. There's the debate whether somebody who's not thoroughly trained in that's going to do more harm than good, but if I could have done something, I would, and I would have been one of those ones wrestling him to the ground, or like the older lady who knocked the gun or grabbed the gun out of his hand. I think it was because of that the damages were less than they could have been.
Wow. You know what, listeners, if you have an opinion, although this show happens to be taped, if you have an opinion, you can get a hold of me personally at Eddie at 991fmtalk.com or Steve at 991talk.com. That's right. You can get a hold of either one of us with your opinions, and we'll probably bring them up at our next, if you will, interview when we're talking about you and your future. Steve, what do you want to go to next?
How about the health care bill?
Oh, God. Please, tell me how that is going to affect each and every one of us.
Well, first of all, it's a giant overreach by the federal government. It's an intrusion on the private sector, and I think it's just another attempt for this administration to move us into European-style socialism. I don't know why we want that. I don't see any evidence that that works.
You know, Steve, you just sparked on something that piqued my interest this last week or so, and that was the fact that, once again, here they've got Congress passing this new law, or new bill, if you will, where they're going to now get involved, FDA, with our food, same thing, more government intervention in everything we do. Everything we do. And Obamacare seems to be the same identical plan. Do you think it'll be appealed?
Well, I think it will be repealed in the House, but it's largely symbolic, as you know, that it probably won't pass the Senate, and even if it did, then Obama would veto the bill. But I think it does have a positive effect in that there are some 20 senators up for re-election in 2012, and by forcing a vote, if it gets to the Senate, we'll see what side they stand on. And plenty of them, after seeing what happened in November, are worried about their job in 2012, and they might just vote for the repeal, knowing that's what the public wants. But I think the Republicans are okay on this. I know it's symbolic. It's not going to go anywhere, perhaps. But I think that's okay because they ran on the platform of repealing health care. So why not follow through with that? And we'll just get to see where everybody lines up on the issue, and that will help us in 2012 as we then move this thing to a vote, or as we go into elections.
You know, Steve, one of the things I find really depressing, though, so many politicians, and I'm even going to include some that I say are on the right side of where I think on a daily basis, they all promised that they would do away with such things as earmarks, but as soon as they got back in Congress, they did not do what they promised during the election.
Yeah, exactly. I think, back to the healthcare specifically, part of it's principle with me. I think principles are important. And this bill, as you know, was passed in the dark of night, essentially. It's nearly 3,000 pages. It's filled with pork. I saw a provision in there that seemed to me scary where Obama is calling for a citizen army. Well, what does that have to do with health care? Why is that in the bill? And it also sounds very much like Germany during a very unpleasant time of our history. Again, it's filled with pork. No one was allowed to read it. Pelosi, it just infuriates me that she said we had to pass it to see what was in it. Why is that a way to pass a bill? So I think we should repeal it just in principle and start over.
I couldn't agree with you.